most of the main part of this building was built in 1942 after the Manhattan Project claimed the New Mexican office on Palace Avenue. And so the front part of this building served as the offices for the New Mexican for 30 years until, under the ownership of Robert McKinney, they built this square building on the back to house the new press. How many of you were in here before this remodel?
I was in the press room.
Of course you were. Well, it was cramped and outdated, and we had people on top of each other. You can imagine that the staff, when this building was designed, was significantly smaller than the 190 employees of the New Mexican today. So we were really on top of one another. The place was old and dirty. For about almost a 15-year period, from the mid-70s to the late 80s, the paper was owned by Gannett. And during that time, very little was done to update the plant for a good reason. Gannett had actually hoped to build a new office and press facility, and then they got into a legal squabble with Robert McKinney, and it was clear that Gannett was not going to own the paper long term, and it just stopped investing in the property. 2 years ago, just about exactly 2 years ago, we picked up lock, stock, and barrel and moved temporarily to an industrial laundry building on Cerritos Road, the old White Swan Laundry. And we were there for 15 months in very crude surroundings, but it was like camping out. And, very difficult situation, but we returned in July, August of 2007, and returned to, it was a very modern, spacious, as you can see, building that was designed for the long haul and for a lot of growth. And of course, about that time, the economy started to collapse. And we certainly haven't seen the growth in the business and in the staff that might have happened, but we are prepared for that when the great turnaround comes.
This is about where the wall that separated the original structure from the addition ran. And there was simply a series of doorways that led from the newsroom and advertising department and composing room into the old press room. The warehouse was on this side of this structure, and the mail room on that side. Some of you will know this, but let me tell a little bit of history quickly. The signature quality of the paper today is that it's locally owned. The owner is Robin Martin, the daughter of Robert McKinney. Robert McKinney bought the newspaper in 1949. He'd make money on Wall Street and fulfilled a lifelong dream to run the newspaper in Santa Fe. He did several interesting things in his life, including serving a term as ambassador to Switzerland under the Kennedy and Johnson administrations. Not long after he returned from Switzerland, his health deteriorated. He and his first wife divorced. He remarried, and much of his life took him to the east, to New York and to Washington, where he's involved in business and politics. So in 1976, he sold the newspaper to Gannett. I won't tell the story of the legal struggle, but in a very short time after that sale, McKinney and Gannett were in a legal fight that lasted 12 years. It ended with his reclaiming ownership of the newspaper. The conditions under which he returned as owner of the newspaper were very favorable. He did not incur any debt to reclaim the newspaper, and he operated it as a growing, thriving business until he died in 2001, at which time his daughter, Robin, became the owner and publisher and editor of the New Mexican. And within a couple of years of her ascension, she made plans to build a press, buy a new press and build a press facility out near the freeway on the frontage road just off of Cerritos Road. And that allowed us to clear out part of this structure and pave the way for the rebuilding of this building. It was, when we moved out, we left nothing behind, no people behind. We left lots of desks and old files and stuff, but this place was completely gutted, and all of the mechanical was torn out. And it was taken down to bare walls, bare ceiling, and you'll see some of that. When we get back there, I'll tell you how they rebuilt that two-story newsroom. Over those years, one of the things that changed was the front. One owner or another rebuilt that front, redirected the traffic. Originally, the entrance to the building was through two doors on the side, but in one of the incarnations, they added an entryway, a vestibule, and brought the traffic through the front door. You would walk down a very institutional looking and feeling long corridor, like we're standing in. Green walls, high, these walls that had there was no natural light. There were very few windows on the interior of the building for sure. Carved up into many small rooms, nooks and crannies. We will be able to peek into some of these areas. Again, I'm sorry I neglected to get a key to let us in. But we designed a very open space, and the architect, Eric Enfield of Santa Fe, designed this corridor to give it, and designed into it some texture and some dimension that really makes it inviting. This is the advertising part. It runs from that first set of doors, two-thirds of the way down the corridor, all the way to the front. And again, it's designed to be very open. There are a few spaces that are identified as offices, but by and large, it's a very open area. And if you look into the ceiling area, the architect wanted to take all of that false ceiling out of there and expose the original woodwork. I use that term loosely because it's not particularly artful, but it gives you a feel for the fact that this is an old building with some history and maybe a few ghosts. And then all of the exposed ductwork is a feature that he wanted, and I think works very nicely in this building. I described the false front that had been constructed on the building at some point in its life. And one of the things that the designer did was restore the front of the building to its original style. We've got this brickwork replaced old tile floor that had been carpeted over several times, and then with this woodwork that represents the earth.
How is the ceiling in there? Is that part of the?
No, that was constructed during the remodel. No, this was not here. None of this area was here.